4 Raspberry Pis, 1 Kubernetes cluster, and nearly 6 hours of me staring at a blank screen, wondering where I had gone wrong. This video contains everything I wish I had while starting out this my Kubernetes Raspberry Pi project. It contains every command, every mistake, every fix in the exact order that they happen, so that you know exactly what to do when you're setting up yours. And at the end of this video, you'll have a full working Kubernetes cluster running on Raspberry Pi, your own hardware. Let's build something. Before we get started, before we even touch the terminal, let's try to figure out why we are doing this. Why are we running a Kubernetes cluster on Raspberry Pi? Why should anyone run a Kubernetes cluster on Raspberry Pi? Well, if you're going to run your Kubernetes Homelab on cloud servers, it's going to cost you a lot of money, sometimes going to 300, 500 USD per month. With this Raspberry Pi cluster, all you need to do is to buy your hardware, and then you have that. It's yours to keep. All you're paying for on a monthly basis is the amount of electricity that you use, which might be a few watts of electricity, and that's it. You get a real cluster, you get real nodes that you can interact with, you get to work with real networking and set up your own LAN, handle real node issues. You actually have to do capacity planning and handle real scheduling on actual nodes. And this is a fantastic way to learn Kubernetes and get a lot of knowledge on the inner workings of a Kubernetes cluster. And for this project, we are using K3s, which is a Kubernetes distribution produced by Rancher. It strips away all the overhead and bloat of managing your own Kubernetes components if you're using something like KubeADM or using a cloud provider. It strips all of that away and gives you a single binary that you can run on your nodes to set up your entire Kubernetes cluster, which is really easy, lightweight, and useful for running a Raspberry Pi cluster. And it runs seamlessly on ARM chips. So K3s is a great choice for us. There are the things that will probably go wrong. Some networking issues can occur in this kind of cluster. You could get issues with your SD card as well. Sometimes you can get issues with running Kubernetes itself, K3s, if you don't set things up properly. So these are some of the things that I faced and fixed, and we're going to talk about them more. So I have 4 Raspberry Pis, which are going to serve as my nodes. I have an 8-port Netgear networking switch. I have 4 very solid SD cards. I'm using SanDisk Ultra for this project. Don't chip out on your SD cards when you're doing this. I'm going to come back to that later, but seriously, don't do that. I'm going to flash my operating system onto the SD card. My operating system here is going to be Raspberry Pi Lite OS 64-bit. I'm going for the Lite version of the operating system because I don't need any desktop applications. That just brings unnecessary resource consumption, which I don't need. I'm trying to keep this as light as possible because I'm going to be deploying many Kubernetes applications that need their own resources. Now, in the imager settings, it's important you make sure you enable SSH through password authentication and set your host name, your username, and your password so that you can log into this Pi device later. I'm going to be naming my Raspberry Pis in this convention KC-RPI-master or -worker the number of the cluster. And I'll go a step further to actually write out the name of that node and paste it on each node. This is very important. I can't stress it enough. It's going to save you a lot of confusion later because all of these devices look alike and you can mix them up if you don't tag them properly. So I'm going to flash the operating system into the SD card now, and this could take a while. So okay, so after flashing them, I'll put the SD card into the Raspberry Pi, and then I'll connect it to my keyboard and mouse, and also connect a HDMI to my screen. And just like that, I can see my Raspberry Pi and watch it boot up. Now, after it boots up, I'm going to log into it using the username and password that I created during setup, and then I can get the shell of my Raspberry Pi and I can interact with it. I'm going to do this across all the 4 nodes, all the 4 Raspberry Pis, and set up my nodes. Now, this is important. This is really important. I learned it the hard way. You actually have to set a static IP address on each of your nodes. If you don't do this, when you set up Kubernetes, when you set up your K3s, and everything is set up, everything is good and dandy, if you then shut it down and later try to put on your nodes again, your router might use the DHCP and assign different IP addresses to the nodes, to the Raspberry Pis the next time you boot the Raspberry Pis up. And that could confuse the setup that you already did with K3s, and you might need to actually reconfigure K3s on your nodes. So it's best that you know this from the beginning. I didn't know that. Set up your static IP address using NMCLI, which is Network Manager CLI, before you continue with the process of installing and setting up K3s. Before going on to install and run K3s on my nodes, I have to make sure that cgroups are enabled on my Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi doesn't come pre-configured to enable cgroups, and cgroups are very important for Flannel, the CNI of Kubernetes, to work. So you need to enable cgroups. And after that, I go ahead to install K3s. I kind of make the mistake here because I wanted to install K3s without traffic, which comes by default as the ingress controller when you install K3s. I want to run traffic by myself and manage it through Flux and Helm. So I needed to disable this there. But I put in the wrong command for that, so that was a mistake that I made while running the command on my masternode. But I was able to find that error and fix it and run the correct command for this, and it ran and installed K3s on my masternode. The next step was then to join the worker nodes to the masternode using the same K3s command and passing the masternode token to the worker node so that they can join the cluster. And this is how you get your K3s Kubernetes cluster running on Raspberry Pi. So after a couple of days of frustration and not knowing what's going on, a lot of networking, a lot of Kubernetes commands run, I finally have a Kubernetes cluster running on Raspberry Pi, running on my Homelab. It self-heals, it schedules workloads, and I own the infrastructure. Isn't that amazing? If you want to go further with this, the next step is to set up Flux, GitHub tool, and connect that with Helm so that I can automatically deploy applications seamlessly just by pushing updates to my GitHub accounts. And then also set up monitoring to make sure we know everything that is going on within this cluster. Then something else that's also important that you do from the start is to set up a persistent storage, either with Ceph or Longhorn or local provisioner or any persistent storage deployments that you know about. And that's part of what I'll be doing in the coming videos. So if you made it this far, you now have a working K3s cluster. You've seen all the mistakes that I made and you've now been able to skip them. That was a deal. And you have a Homelab. If this helps, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel to grow and reach more people who are interested in this kind of content. And drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you're planning to run on your cluster. I'm genuinely curious as to what people are doing with their Homelab clusters.